Hello, hello, hello. 3 o'clock as promised. I'm doing really good with my times these days. Um, so I wanted to come on today and talk a little bit about generational trauma and then also merging together therapeutic trauma dynamics and paradigms and also more soul-aligned integrated trauma paradigms. And I'm actually going to start out just giving a little bit of education because I feel like the word generational trauma generational trauma is being thrown out there a lot through, at least in my world, through like coaching and leaders and entrepreneurs. But I feel like there's not a lot of information out there about it. So people are just throwing it out there and they're not really explaining it. And so I just wanted to bring through my opinion on that and then weave through a little bit of my like past teachings in the therapeutic world and then my current teachings in a more like spiritual, soul-aligned way of looking at trauma. So one thing that's been really helpful for me is moving into a new paradigm of trauma, and essentially what I'm going to be calling trauma are impressions. And so the way that you can think about this is, like, one way that I thought about it was, there's dinosaurs that, all of that happened, like the bomb, and they like died. And so the fossils essentially in the earth have impressions in them of what they ate, what fights they got into, like were they a predator or were they not a predator? So there's a lot of impressions that we can see within fossils, within dinosaur animal bones, but also human bones. Like we see those impressions within us. And that also is generational. So if we're talking about generational trauma, that just means that these impressions have essentially been going on throughout generations in our lives. So talking about like the old text, the old like Veda text in Hindu mythology and throughout the spiritual text, it says that we actually hold on to past impressions that go back 7 generations in our lifetime. So that's huge, right? So that's 7 generations. That's a lot. That's a lot of like impressions that we are as human beings in this world are holding on to, and that we also get the opportunity to move through. And so generational trauma, that can be the big T trauma, which is like physical, sexual, emotional abuse, but it can also be the little t trauma where it's like financial issues that come up. So if you lived in generational poverty and you didn't have a lot of money, a lot of financial impressions can come up. If you lived in a family where mom or dad was abusing alcohol or abusing substances, then that can be a generational impression over time, because usually, not all the time, because I didn't see this all the time, but usually it comes from a generational pattern, like a grandparent or great-grandparent. So there's big T, little t traumas in the therapeutic world, and I also see that as they're all impressions. It's all the same thing, because essentially the definition of trauma, or like the definition of an impression, is something that has threatened the way that we cope with daily life. And if we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, then that gets into I'm not able to function at work, I'm not able to function within my family, I'm not able to function within my relationships. So that's a little bit more that's more like normal for post-traumatic stress disorder. But when I'm talking about like generational trauma, these are things that have been happening over past lifetimes for people. So bringing this all in, and why is this important to talk about? Well, one, we're talking a lot about it out in the world, and also a big part of what I want to do is bring education to people, and also just bring a different awareness into the word trauma, right? Because it can be so packed with different ways of how we take that word. Or I know I've said that out loud, and I talk about like trauma in my childhood, and like this has been going on, in my opinion, in my family for generations. I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's been happening for an extended period of time. And it's actually my job within this lifetime to teach and to bring awareness and to bring understanding and knowledge around these impressions, and then move through it so it does not continue to happen in generations after me. So that's a little bit about generational trauma. I talked about impressions. So with leaders in this work and within the world, like if you're any type of leader in your family, in your community, if you're a teacher, anybody who's giving information, you're around, you're in influential positions in your life, then you are a leader. It is what it is. So if you are that and you have these past impressions, which is my opinion that 99% of us have these past impressions or past generational impressions that we've been dealing with for a very long time. So if we have this, the way that it can come up now, so let's say you've done some work on it, you've moved through it. Like I've done EMDR, which is like eye movement desensitization therapy. There's also other therapeutic techniques like cognitive reprocessing therapy. So there's all of these different things, and if you've gotten those done, that's great, that's wonderful. And also, if you haven't, I do encourage you to look into some of that, but also, I believe what we're moving into is that it doesn't have to be that difficult, right? So moving through trauma, no matter what it is, I know for me, like I made it really difficult for myself. And a couple of things that I saw that it was showing up in my life over time was that I would blame other people. I'd blame other people for the decisions I made and for the things that I did in college and things like that. I would not speak up, right? So I would not speak my truth. I felt like I didn't have a voice and that people weren't listening to me. So a lot of blaming, a lot of resentment, and a lot of just bringing myself down a little bit. So making myself really small so I couldn't be big, right? Because I had all of these I have generational trauma, and there's trauma in my life, which essentially we all have a form of trauma, right? But I made it into this huge thing, and it doesn't have to be. And it also, we don't have to blame the people in our lives who were perpetrators or who were active in any of that. We don't have to do that. We have the choice to not bring those people in and say, I blame you. The greatest thing we can do as leaders and people in the community is forgiving the people who have done things in our lives. And forgiveness is not, I'm okay with you now and we can be friends or, whatever. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you have forgiven them, and therefore you have forgiven yourself and any emotions that go along with that. So bring all of this back. We all have some form of generational trauma, in my belief. We don't, these are just my beliefs. So from what I've seen, I've worked with people on this for years, and I see so much of this. I see that, so in the therapeutic world, I saw that the word trauma was not taken very well. I would have clients who would say I haven't been through any trauma, and they had been in gun violence, and they had been in car accidents, and they had grown up in a family with low resources and all of that. So a lot of people don't, not a lot of people, but some of the idea is that is not an impression or a trauma. And so getting into that spiritual piece, looking at these experiences that have happened in our past do not have to define us. So that's a post that I put up today. It's it actually gets to teach us who we're here to be and how we're here to show up in the world. So like I said, if you're a leader in your community, if you are a leader here today, one of the biggest things that you can do, I believe, is to claim any of these impressions that have come up in the experience of your life. And just know, so that's the first thing, is claim it, right? And then the second thing is bring awareness and understanding around these impressions, and know, the biggest thing here is understanding that this has been going on within the generational form of your lifetime for a long time. So just know, this is most likely something, if you decide that you can move through here in this lifetime, so it doesn't have to go like generation after generation. So the third thing I wanted to talk about was, asking yourself what, what was this here to teach me? What am I supposed to do with all of this, like, in-person experiences that have been a part of my personal experience? What is this here to teach me? Instead of blaming, instead of building resentments, instead of judging yourself, instead of beating yourself up, instead of saying it was my fault, because it's not. Any impression that we have has nothing to do with us. And if that's like a confrontation or a trigger for you, like, that's okay. It has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. So it comes back to, what do I need to ask myself? Right? What is this here to teach me? How does this help me grow in my lifetime, in this lifetime? How does this help future generations? How does this help my children? How does this help my family that I'm surrounded with? Do I blame them? Do I resent them in any kind of way? Do I criticize them? Do I criticize myself? So just ask yourself these things. Just be really curious. You don't have to, journal about it for 40 days, and you don't have to sit in a therapist's office for 20 to 30 sessions. That I love, I love therapy and I love it, but work through it. As a leader, it doesn't have to be hard. Declare today, I'm going to move through this, and it does not have to be hard for me. Right? We have the power to do that. We have the power to say, my dad wasn't there when I was younger, and I'm going to go back to that little kid. I'm going to go back to that time and say, hey, I'm really sorry, but I'm here now. I am the adult in your life now, and I love you, and I think you are wonderful, and I am so proud of you, right? And then, be that for that child, and then move with that, right? And then just see that, okay, that was an impression in my life that had this, and this effect, but it doesn't have to affect me anymore. That's it. That's all we have to do. It doesn't have to be that difficult. It's like that. I posted a poem the other day about she let go. She didn't write it in her planner. And you can say she or he or it, we let go. Or we. I like we. We let go. We didn't have to write it down. We didn't have to speak it out into the world. We didn't have to tell our family. We didn't have to do all this stuff. We just decided. And we wrote somewhere, I have decided that this is an impression in my life, and this impression does not have to lead my life any longer. Right? It doesn't have to lead me anymore. So those are my 3 things. Claim it, own it. I'm looking at my notes. I need notes, right? Understanding, bring awareness, and ask questions. Be curious about your life. It doesn't have to be right or wrong or good or bad. I believe everything that has happened to me in my life to bring me into the woman that I am today, or into the human being that I am today. And you can decide the same thing. I decided that a long time ago. I decided my impressions are not going to impact me in an uncomfortable way any longer. They weren't going to bring up negative emotion or uncomfortable emotions, right? I wasn't going to blame anyone anymore. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to live that way. So if I can do that, right, whatever I can do, you can also do for yourself. And you can love yourself through the process. Because the last thing I just want to leave here with you is that bringing in love and forgiveness and gratitude always. I love myself. I love my experience. I forgive myself. I forgive my experiences and my impressions. And I bring gratitude into my life. I'm grateful for who I am today. I'm grateful for what all these experiences are teaching me. I'm grateful for my growth and my learning and the opportunity to do so. And the fact that I get to do that in this world, in this comfortable, beautiful, miraculous world. Yeah. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you thought about it or not. It's up to you. But I hope everybody has a wonderful day.